Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Beat. I'm your host, Zareh Kantzabedian. Today, we have another fantastic guest, Packers beat reporter Andy Herman. Andy does fantastic work for the Packers. His work is very insightful. You can find most of it at the Pack-A-Day podcast and at his YouTube page, at the Pack-A-Day podcast YouTube page. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a very busy time of year at training camp, creating your own content. How are you? How's been your off season?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks as always for having me. And yeah, off season has been fast, non-existent. It just goes by in a millisecond, but I can't believe we're already getting set for Packers Lions coming up here in a couple weeks. But no, it's going very, very well. And again, really appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for being on. We'll just jump right into it. Let's start with Jordan Love. Over his past 2 years, Jordan Love has had two somewhat opposing seasons. 2023, he was awesome. 2024, he was pretty much average good. Obviously, he was playing through injury, which hampered his practice time. Getting those details with his wide receivers, it was somewhat turbulent. This year at training camp, there are also some key offensive injuries happening. And, hypothetically, let's just say hypothetically, they go into the season healthy. They stay relatively healthy throughout the season. The weapons, the offensive line. What is Jordan Love's ceiling in 2025?
Yeah, I think very clearly it's a top 10 quarterback in this league and maybe even in that top 7 category. And if things went completely according to plan, I don't think anyone would be stunned if he's ultimately in the MVP conversation. But I think that's the beautiful mystery of Jordan Love is we don't know entirely what to expect yet. He's going into year 6, 3 years as a starter. If you remember 2023, midway through, Green Bay's struggling. They're at the trade deadline. They trade away Rasul Douglas. And at that time, Goody at the deadline is basically saying, yeah, these next, couple months are going to be really huge for Jordan. I mean, basically making it seem like we're about to find out. He didn't have that long-term contract yet. Remember, he was basically locked in for one more season. Basically, that second half of 2023 was going to decide if Jordan Love was the franchise quarterback or not. And then he went completely bananas. He went totally off, had an unbelievable run. And that was, probably in Green Bay, not ultimately that dissimilar to like the Aaron Rodgers run the table. It was that good. It was every single time the ball left his hand, you just knew something good was going to happen. They lose to the 49ers at the end of that game. And every Green Bay fan is like, nope, there it is. We found our next guy. He's the franchise quarterback. He is, maybe even the next in this list of Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to now Jordan Love. And then 2024 comes around. Hope is springing eternal. They've got their quarterback there, back for another season with their young wide receivers. And he immediately has the MCL injury against Philly. Clearly affects him. That leads into a groin injury against Jacksonville, has a thumb injury at the end of the year, and never quite looked like himself. And I think still had total command of the offense, knew what he was doing, and clearly would have been a lot better had it not been for the injuries. But there's still sort of this nagging thing of like, well, what if it was just a hot end of 2023? And what if 2024 was more real? What if the beginning of 2023 was more real? So now it's up to him to go out and really kind of prove the caliber of quarterback that he is consistently throughout the course of an entire season. And I think that's what everyone's waiting for. And as soon as that happens, if we get proof of concept on that in the entire year, I think that is set in stone of what Jordan is moving forward. But I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see it for an entire year before we crown him as either a top 8 guy or a, top 16 guy or whatever that may be. I think we're about to find out this year.
And I got to agree, as an outsider, somebody who's not a Packers fan or who is not following Packers news all the time, I think I'd say it's safe to hang your hat on his 2023 season. And you understand when you take into context 2024. I mean, even with the injury in 2024, he was solid. I mean, he was league average at least in most major passing statistics from a macro perspective, right? And there's also like the micro stuff where you can kind of look at EPA on early downs and stuff like that. He was still fantastic on those metrics. That's stuff that we don't really get to see. The public really doesn't get to see. But I mean, he was 5.8% on touchdown passes per pass attempt last year, and the league average was 5.2%. I mean, he was right there in passing yards per game, league average. One fantastic stat I found from Jordan Love last year. So per PFF, right? Jordan Love was under pressure 9% of the time in 2024, which is league average last year for quarterbacks under pressure. He was the only QB to not record a sack on pressures that he created himself, right? So there were a lot of pressures that your offensive line creates. Most of the time it's attributed to your offensive line, but there's a fraction, 10 to 20% that QBs create for themselves. And he was at about 13% that he created for themselves, but he never absorbed a sack in 2024. In 2023, that number was at 6. He created 6 sacks for himself on the pressures that he allowed. So there were also things that he was doing when the ball wasn't being released from his hand. Before the ball even left his hand, he was doing some really good things. So I do agree that, they're assuming that they go into the year healthy, that he has really, honestly, I think he has like top 5 overall upside in the league as far at the position. Going to the running back position, the running back position it feels more of a straightforward kind of position. You got Josh Jacobs, who was a workhorse last year. He was one of 6 running backs to receive over 300 rush attempts. I partly think that might have been because of the Jordan Love injury. I don't think they were originally intending to give him that many rush attempts, but so be it. And he pretty much put the team on his back for the most part of the year. Do you think it's going to be steady as she goes with Josh Jacobs this year? Another 300 carry year this year. Also, Marshawn Lloyd, I saw on your Pack a Day podcast that you're projecting him to start the year on IR, which is unfortunate because, coming out of USC, one of the most elusive backs in the class, pass catching talent. I think he adds another really valuable dimension for Matt LaFleur on offense as a pass catching option out of the backfield. And I know Matt LaFleur loves to layer all these really unique dimensions of offense on the Green Bay Packers. And then there's also, Emmanuel Wilson, who shined with the opportunities that he was given. He was very good with the opportunities that he was given as a backup. And then Chris Brooks, which is every film evaluator sicko's one of their favorite prospects. I love Chris Brooks coming out of college. How do you see these guys playing out the year? Josh Jacobs, you touch on him how you want.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I still think they want to be very effective in running the football. And even with Jordan and all these new wide receivers, it still would not surprise me to see them lean pretty heavily on Josh Jacobs in the running game. I think they want to be they want to be a balanced team, but I think they almost want to lean a little bit more run heavy if given the opportunity, and then kind of set up the pass from there. So I still expect him to have a major role in this offense. I bet if they were telling the truth, they would say they'd ideally like to not give him quite as many carries, just kind of keep him fresh throughout the course of the year. But it's kind of one of the reasons you bring Josh Jacobs in is he has that ability to be the bell cow back and kind of carry the load. So I still would be pretty bullish on him getting a good chunk of carries. And to add on top of that, Marshawn Lloyd has been injured again. Now, I don't know for sure if he's going to start the year on IR. We don't have a great knowledge yet of the length of that injury for Lloyd, other than Matt LaFleur saying that he's going to miss some time. So we'll see where that ultimately ends up. Maybe he's ready to go for the start of the season. Maybe he's not. Even if he is, you're getting to a point of how much do you trust that he's going to be able to stay healthy, because it has not been the case. He's had a multitude of injuries so far in his first year plus in Green Bay. If everything's perfect, I think they would love to use those two as a 1-2 punch with, kind of Jacobs being the bell cow and then, Lloyd being kind of the change of pace back that brings a really exciting dynamic to the team. And then Chris Brooks being your third down back, being the guy that picks up all the blitzes, gets all the checkdowns, does a lot of that sort of stuff, but can also be a good runner when you need him to be and play some special teams. So that's the way that I kind of see it right now with Lloyd being banged up. I think Wilson kind of takes that number 2 role as the second guy carrying the football, whereas Chris Brooks stays in that number 3 running back spot. And now we're just going to have to wait and see when Lloyd gets back and what he can do to help this team once he is back. But still very bullish on Josh Jacobs being a pretty heavy workload guy within this offense, and this still being a team that wants to run the ball quite a bit.
If say Josh Jacobs goes down for whatever reason, if they give him too much on his plate, he ends up getting injured. What does this backfield look like if Josh Jacobs goes down? Is it just kind of a split between, again, assuming Marshawn Lloyd is healthy, is it just kind of a split between 3 backs and then, Jayden Reed getting more work?
Yeah, what I would expect in that situation is they probably do a little bit more pass heavy stuff. They probably, they still want to be balanced, but then it probably tips more in the favor of being, a passing offense. But I would expect actually Emmanuel Wilson in that scenario kind of to just take on a little bit of a lesser Josh Jacobs style role as kind of the primary runner. Marshawn Lloyd still to use as kind of the change of pace, fun dynamic back, and Chris Brooks still be used as the number 3 role. So it's an interesting dynamic where if everyone's healthy, Wilson might be the second best overall back, but he probably doesn't have a role on most game days because it's probably just Jacobs with Lloyd being the change of pace and then Brooks being the third down. But if Jacobs were to actually get hurt, I think Wilson kind of takes a lot of that load from Josh Jacobs in that scenario. So we could definitely see 4 running backs make this team. And I kind of see it playing out that way if that does actually, well, hopefully it doesn't come to fruition with Jacobs being hurt. But if it would, I think that's probably the direction they would go in.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And there's another person I want to talk about who could be an interesting asset in the backfield. He's part of the wide receiver group, and we're going to move on to them real quick. So right now we haven't had, over the past 2 years, we haven't had a alpha wide receiver, since Devontae Adams left, apparently, like a classic alpha wide receiver who's, just dominated targets. We've had Romeo Doubs, who's gotten better over the past 2 years. He's accumulated more and more of a target share over the past 2 years. Jayden Reed, honestly, I think he might be one of their best receivers right now on the field from what we've seen. I mean, this guy, he's been used in orbit motion, fly motion, jet sweep motions. He's used at all levels of the field. He's used, and he's on the field the least, and he's accumulated the most amount of yards in 2024, which is incredible. And then we got, the first wide receiver that the Packers drafted since 2002, and Matthew Golden out of Texas. What do you think? Is there a possibility that any of these receivers step up? Does Dobbs step up even further and get better this year? Does Matthew Golden take that number 1 spot and, ascend and start to trend as, an alpha wide receiver? What do you think about the wide receiver room this year?
I think all of it's possible. Yes. Yeah. From a fantasy perspective, my advice, and never take my advice when it comes to a fantasy perspective, I'll lay that out there first. But my advice would be to stay away from Packers wide receivers. There's just too many mouths to feed. First of all, we talked about Josh Jacobs is going to be heavily involved in this offense as kind of the primary running back. He'll get checked down. So he'll get everything. He's going to be a big time player for Green Bay. Tucker Kraft is going to get more and more opportunities at tight end as he continues to get better. He's going to be a big time option in Green Bay. Now you still have Luke Musgrave at tight end. You still have potentially Marshawn Lloyd at running back. And now you've got Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jayden Reed, Matthew Golden. Who am I missing? Doubs, Reed, Golden, Wicks, Savion Williams is the other one. Sorry. You've got those 5 guys who all could potentially get playing time at wide receiver. And Christian Watson sounds like he's trending to potentially be ready as soon as he's eligible to come off of the PUP list, which for Green Bay would be week 6 since they have a week 5 bye week, which actually even gives him that other, another week off in there. And so you could get him back as well. There's just way too many mouths to feed in this offense. And I think you're going to see this ball get distributed all over the place. Now, when you get into red zone, third down opportunities, must have it. I think that's where the question is going to be from a pure football X's and O's standpoint. Are you calling the play that you want? Or does it get to the point where it's like, all right, 3rd and 8, we need to get the ball to Matthew Golden here, or 3rd and 8, we need to get the ball to Jayden Reed here. I think that's what remains to be seen. Green Bay needs somebody to kind of step into that role in the must-have it situations and in the red zone situations. Who ultimately becomes that guy is kind of is as good as guess as anyone. And maybe nobody does. Maybe multiple guys do. And it just, again, gets spread out between them. But that's going to be the really fun, interesting aspect. But right now, Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, all those guys, Jayden Reed. Well, right now, Reed and Wicks and Savion Williams and Christian Watson are all hurt. So it makes it tough to tell like what kind of that pecking order is going to be like. But I would expect a lot of these guys to get a lot of playing time and the ball to be spread out pretty equally amongst these wide receivers.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question that nobody cares about, but I'm going to ask about Savion Williams because he was an interesting prospect coming out of college. He had like about 65 rush attempts, and he also uses receiver, still raw as a prospect. And I think you see LaFleur like to use pony packages out of the backfield. You've seen Jayden Reed in the backfield at the same time, lined up with Josh Jacobs. Savion Williams, I thought, was going to be used in somewhat of the same manner. Unfortunately, he's got his hamstring injury right now, he just had a concussion he just came out of. These practice reps for him are going to be very crucial. How does this deter a rookie prospect, someone like Savion Williams, from seeing the field, missing valuable preseason snaps, live preseason snaps during games? How does this delay his progress in seeing the field?
Yeah, it's a huge bummer because, first of all, with all the other wide receiver injuries, he would have been in line to get a ton of reps and even a lot of playing time in preseason. had he been healthy. Not only did he have the concussion, like you mentioned, a hamstring right now, but he's recovering from a shoulder injury, which is why he was wearing the red jersey early on in mini camp and OTAs, and was limited to start training camp as well. So he's had 3 different injuries already, and it's definitely limited him. And like the other thing too is he's a little bit more on the raw side, especially as a route runner and just as kind of a polished wide receiver. So he kind of needs those reps as well. I think what you could look at is, he's probably wide receiver 5, but you also could get into a situation where if a Malik Heath or McCole Hardman do make this team, they could ultimately be wide receiver 5 on game day, and Savion Williams ends up getting inactive and more of a redshirt sort of season as he kind of progresses throughout the year. I think he's probably in line for wide receiver 5 right now and active on game day, and maybe a couple packages here and there. Might even get a look as a kick returner if he can get healthy here and there as well. But I don't think he's going to have a major role to begin with unless he's healthy, and we still see a lot of these injuries at wide receiver. And I just think it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get ingrained a little bit more. Wouldn't stun me if he had a couple, games where you're like, oh my goodness, look at what Savion Williams is doing. But he's going to need those opportunities, and he's going to need to make the most of them when he gets them, if we're going to see a little bit more out of Savion. But right now, it just as easily could look more as a redshirt year as it could, you seeing some big time stuff from Savion Williams.
All right, sounds good. We're going to take a quick break and give a quick shout out to the Fast Draft app.
It is 32 Beat Writers season, August, when they can make you a lot of money, especially on a platform like Fast Draft. Doesn't have hundreds of best ball bro killers. So when there's an injury and you hear about it through 32 Beat Writers, you can run to the Fast Draft app and jump into a Flex 4 game. Just draft any 6 Flex players. Top 4 enter your lineup every week. Or the Rabbit, 15-round best ball. Get your quarterback wide receiver stacks, get your running back sleepers. And if you follow 32 Beat Writers, you can jump into these draft rooms and be like, oh my God, I'm avoiding this guy at all costs, and I'm gobbling up all of this other running back before the larger public is fully aware, has fully digested the ramifications of the information that 32 Beat Writers is sharing. So go get Fast Draft, type in that code 32BW. 32BW is the code. Get you a $50 deposit match on Fast Draft. Now let's go start drafting faster.
All right, and we're going to wrap it up with the tight end portion of the show. And we talked about it earlier. You said Tucker Kraft was somebody that you wanted to aim for in this Packers offense before any of the wide receivers. And after looking at some stats, I kind of agree with you today. He and Luke Musgrave are the two, I guess, well-known tight ends. Tucker Kraft, it was pretty much his show last year. Luke Musgrave was, 2 years ago, Luke Musgrave was the favorite and fell out of favor. Is there any room? I mean, you already alluded to what you expect for Tucker Kraft, and I guess you can just re-elaborate for the sake of the portion of the show. But is there anything left for Luke Musgrave too after Tucker Kraft, does his work on the field?
Yeah, I would say the first thing to know is that Tucker Kraft is clearly and obviously tight end 1. There's no competition here. There's no equal split playing time. He's tight end 1, and where he's good to go, and he's in the game, and they need a tight end out there, he's going to be the first option all day, every day. Now, they may get him, a few plays off here and there and get Musgrave in the game just to, again, manage the workload a little bit, but there's no competition there whatsoever. I do think they would love to go more 2 tight end personnel this year, but Luke Musgrave is going to have to earn that as well. And I would say he's been, not quiet, but it hasn't exactly been a massive offseason for Luke Musgrave when it comes to what he's done in camp or preseason. I do think the game has slowed down for him a little bit, but the idea of Luke Musgrave has been better than the actual functionality of Luke Musgrave within this offense so far. It's a big year for him. And if he can go out and certainly take that step, then he's going to just be another weapon within this offense that they have at their disposal. But this is an opportunity for him to go out and show it. And quite frankly, we haven't had the opportunity to see a ton of 2 tight end looks with Musgrave and Kraft, because early in their career, like Kraft had dealt with injuries, then Musgrave had injuries. Last year, Musgrave had injuries. So we haven't had a bunch of time with those two together. I think we'll see a little bit more of it, but like I said, they're going to have to see it be successful. And a lot of that's going to be on Luke Musgrave this year.
Yeah, Kraft was definitely the guy. He was the guy in the offense. I think he was pretty much the leader. He was the offense as far as like a receiving weapon to go. I mean, he had a higher snap share than any Packers wide receiver. He led the team in receiving touchdowns, 4th in total touchdowns among tight ends last year, 2nd in yards per reception on the team. I think like you said, if you're going to target anybody in fantasy, and you said I don't trust anybody, don't trust me for giving fantasy advice. Well, for the Packers, we're going to trust you. That's why we have you here today, Andy. And I definitely agree with you. If anybody's going to target any receiving weapon from this team this year, it's going to be Tucker Kraft. Yeah, and as far as you saying that they want to go to more 12 personnel, I have been noticing a shift, a trend. It's been small incremental trends in 12-man personnel usage over the past 2 years in the league. I think it's becoming more and more prominent. Like a lot of teams like the Bills, Lions, even like a team like the Bengals, like you wouldn't expect to use a lot of 12-man personnel. I think Bengals were top 12 in 12-man personnel package, but we're not here to talk about them. We're here to talk about the Packers. Anyway, that's going to be our show today. Andy, tell us one thing that you think all listeners should know about that is going completely overlooked this year in the offseason.
Yeah, I just think that you are going to see a breakout season and campaign potentially from Edgerrin Cooper. He looked awesome at the end of last year and has carried that over into training camp so far. Their first round pick from last year, Jordan Morgan, is really starting to look the part of a starting NFL offensive lineman. And I would just say, beware of some of the injuries that are taking place in Green Bay right now. There's a lot of them. So to see which ones of these are able to get back by week 1 is going to be really important. They have Detroit week 1, and then week 2, Thursday Night Football, immediately after it, they have Washington. So 2 really tough opponents right away to start the season, really in like the first 4 or 5 days of the regular season. So they're going to need to be ready for those 2 games. And, I think the thing going back to last year, Green Bay was really good against bad teams. And they basically faced 6 good teams, maybe 7 if you count Houston. If you count Houston, they got 1 win there. But the 6 other teams that they played, Minnesota, Philly, and Detroit, they went 0-6 in those games. And as mentioned, they now have Detroit and Washington coming to Green Bay those first 2 weeks. They're going to get an opportunity to remedy their 1-5 record against the division last year and their 0-6 against big-time opponents right away with Detroit week 1 and Washington week 2 when it comes to big-time opponents. So hopefully they can play better, but we're going to learn a lot about the Green Bay Packers in those first 2 weeks.
Thank you for all that insightful information for the Packers for the show, Andy. Tell everybody where they can find you, where your content's being created, Twitter handle, all that stuff.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL on social media, Pack-A-Day Podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and over on YouTube as well. We release a new piece of Packers content 365 days a year. A lot of times we're posting multiple things as well. So go check it out, Pack-A-Day Podcast, wherever you get your favorite pods, and over on YouTube.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for checking us out. Check us out on YouTube. Check out our website. Check out our Twitter page. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, I'm Zareh Kantzabedian for Beyond the Beat. See ya.